The Bible is a fascinating book, but sometimes it may seem dull and lifeless. In the following videos and corresponding assignments, you will learn the key steps for understanding the Bible, and more specifically the stories or the narratives. The examples will be taken from the Gospels, but the principles can be applied to any story in the Old or New Testament. Through these steps, you will discover the beauty and the depth of the Bible, and I hope and pray that at the end you will know the Bible as a fascinating book. So let's start with the big picture. The Bible is a single book with a single story. This story starts in Eden, where God creates the man and the woman. Immediately after creation, in the very next story, the man and the woman run away from God and they want to become God. And this leads them to pain, to suffering, to anger, to envy, to hunger, to misery, and ultimately to death. The rest of the story tells us how God saves the man over and over and leads the people back to happiness, to life, to love, and to Him. This is called the story of salvation, which is a story about the fulfillment and application of the plan of salvation. And the story ends in the future where God reunites with the people. Now, in the middle of this story are 4 relatively short books which are called the Gospels. They cover the time when God came to live with the people. He came to live with them, to be one of them, or we could say one of us. He came to show us personally how to live. He came to personally express His love and care for us. And finally, to die for us so that we can live. This is the big picture. And now we can move on to your gospel and to your understanding of the gospel you've selected for this semester. Let's start with the obvious foundation. In order to understand the Bible, we have to read the Bible. It may sound simple, and it may be very tempting to open a commentary or Google the meaning of the text. Unfortunately, that is how we often go about quoting, about interpreting and explaining the Bible or other sacred texts. We don't read them, we read about them. In this class, I do not want you to read about the Bible, I want you to read the Bible. If you already know these stories, if you read them, you heard them, I want you to read them again. But I challenge you to read them as if you've never read them before. Read them like you're reading them for the very first time, and I know this is not easy. Let the Bible tell you the end of the story instead of you knowing the end of the story. It is not easy, but you can learn to read in this way. And step number 2 goes hand in hand with step number 1, pray. Bible is a sacred text about God, and therefore it should be approached with respect. My grandmother always used to tell me, never open the Bible without praying. So now that we got these 2 very important points out of the way, let's move on to the text. And again, the very first point is read. Read the entire book as a single story. So sit down and enjoy the book you've chosen. Now, as you read, think about the gospel. And think about it as a single story, which is not always easy because it comprises of many little stories. The gospel covers one basic story. It is the life of Jesus, His death, and ultimately His resurrection. However, each gospel has its own look at the story of Jesus in its own way, with its own perspective. So read your gospel as a single story. And at the end, try to summarize the plot of the story in about 4 to 8 points. Don't go over 8. Identify the main problem and find a resolution. Everything in the middle is going to be the author leading you to the fulfillment of the problem resolution. Here is an example from the book of Mark. Mark starts with a little development with Jesus preparing for his ministry. And soon enough, we find what is the main problem in the book of Mark. People do not know God. The partial resolution comes through Jesus teaching the people about God and his ministry in different areas. There are two main complications. The first one comes in the first half of the book through demons proclaiming who Jesus is at the wrong time and at the wrong place. The second complication, primarily through the second half of the book, comes through the Pharisees who are trying to kill Jesus and prevent him from revealing who God is. The ultimate resolution of the book, where Jesus reveals God's love, is seen through the death and resurrection of Jesus. So now it's your turn. Read your book, read the entire gospel, listen to the story, allow the story to surprise you, look at the big picture, and think, how does this story speak to your life? For the assignment that you need to submit, I want to see 5 points. First of all, what is the main purpose of the story? Why is your gospel written? Second, what is the plot of the story? This is a simple summary of the story. Number 3, who are the main characters? You will see a lot of characters because of all the little stories. However, try to see the characters that show up throughout the entire story and limit these to about 3 to 5 characters. Point number 4, who is the audience? And you can think about the past and the present. For whom was this book written? And finally, what kind of Jesus did you meet in this story?